going to take a few minutes and, by popular demand, demonstrate a little bit of how to distress or sand furniture or decor, if you will, that has been chalk painted. This is a step that is not the most enjoyable because it's messy. In fact, I'm outside on my porch because I don't want the dust in my house. But the reward is very worth it as far as the results. If you want to make something look gold. Now there are dozens of different ways to distress and make something look gold. You can actually wet sand, which means you take like a wet rag and rub it really hard. It's chalk paint. It's going to soften up. So sometimes if the weather's too cold, you could do wet sanding. If you're just touching with sandpaper, it's probably okay to do inside, but I would recommend outdoors. I also do recommend wearing a mask. Oftentimes I'll have a mask and also bring in a good fan where I can blow the dust away from me. That helps a lot. For my demonstrations, I'm going to forgo that part and try to keep it simple and just demonstrate a variety of sanding and not do my normal gung-ho sanding that would require mask and fans and all that other stuff. You wouldn't be able to hear me if I had my fan on. One of the other things I like to do with larger furniture and other pieces, I actually have a blower, and I like to just blow up my pieces with a yard blower because it just gets the dust off there really well. Of course, you can come back with a light damp rag and wipe it off. Sometimes even a damp rag will distress it more than you want. So just be careful. Just kind of get the dust free as much as you can, and you should be fine. After sanding, the next steps would be, some people like to wax, some people put a top coat. I'm a top coat kind of person. Wax is okay, but I don't like the feel of it. I don't know if it protects long term, so bottom line, I like to do more top coat. And usually polyacrylic works really well for me. Now, be careful when you're distressing. You need to know if your piece can, if you haven't protected your piece, you could have what's called bleeding, where when you sand into the glaze or the varnish of the original piece, you could release some of the chemicals that top coat really would react with and cause problems. So we'll assume that these pieces are going to be fine. This piece was actually unfinished wood. So what I've done on this piece is I painted it with a base coat of gray, then came over with a coat of white. In fact, if you look closely, it's not even very well painted, and I did that on purpose. You can see some of the gray. I want it to look like over time it's been painted by different people. So when you distress something, you want it to take in consideration of how weathered or how old you want it to look. This one I want it to look aged. I'm not going to go back and put any kind of other coating on it to make it dirty and all that. So we're going to let distressing release the different layers, the wood, the gray, and I think it's going to be a really cool effect. So I'm not going to sand the whole piece. I'm just going to sand part of it, and then I'm going to switch to some different pieces to give you some variety of sanding. Now, as far as sanding goes, these are my favorite tools. I like to use the sanding blocks. These are something you can easily get at like a box store. I like to go to Harbor Freight. They're a lot cheaper. They do have different grits. They don't last forever, but sometimes the ones that are left over are nice because the grit's less, and you can, right now this is a kind of a medium grit. This could really tear up a piece if you're not doing it right. I think this piece is going to do really well because I want it to be rough. This is a 80 grit, I believe. 80 grit sandpaper. This is really good if you're, again, want a little bit more control, some flexibility. I just basically cut my sandpaper sheets in three, folded in thirds, and I've got three sides to wear out. Again, very rough. Be careful on your delicate pieces. This is not a good idea. You actually look like you're sanding with glass and just really tear up a piece. I wouldn't sand glass and things like that. This is a 220, same principle, full sheet cut in thirds and folded 3 times. Again, if you want flexibility, delicate touch, This doesn't have a lot of give to it. Nice thing about this type of sandpaper is that it actually is a sponge, so over time it can get softer. It can bend. It does a decent job. Right now it's really stiff because I haven't used it yet. Let me grab one that's been used. This one here is a little bit more flexible because I've used it. In fact, it's kind of teal from a previous piece. It's not as coarse because I've worn it out already. You might want to be careful if you're going to sand previously of teal and then put it on white, some of that teal will carry over. You want to make sure you get all that off. So again, this is my sanding tools. There are other things you could use that could be a little bit more aggressive or more delicate, but over the last few years, this has been my go-to group. And now I will tell you, if you have delicate hands, office hands, soft hands, you might want to wear gloves because this sandpaper, especially the 80 and heavy grids, you'll fill it the next day and you'll want to use a lot of lotion. My hands are past that point where I've used enough sandpaper where I'm not too affected. But if I sand it for 2 hours, my hands are going to be very dry. So again, you might want to use some nice soft or some maybe garden gloves where the sandpaper is not directly on your hands. Yes, you can use sanding tools, but to me, you can't get sanding tools in all these crevices, and by the time you do all that, you would have the piece done. So yes, I have them. I'll use the sanding tools for electric tools for larger, flatter pieces like a tabletop. For these pieces that are small, there's no way that that's going to save me any time. So let's get into sanding some pieces and take a look at what we can do to try the different sanding types and sanding projects and just show you a variety of techniques. So first of all, as I mentioned before, I want this piece to be a little rough. So you can start wherever, it doesn't really matter. This is going to have a lot of different pieces. It'll probably take me about 20 minutes to sand if I stay aggressive with it. You might want to start easy and just say, okay, how does a sanding block that doesn't have much grit left handle? It's not doing much to the flat. It is starting to knock some of the corner off, but again, this could take me a long time. I want to actually go a little bit more aggressive with it. So using my brand new medium grit sanding block, I'm going to go into it. You can start seeing the dust and already start seeing the previous colors come through. Some paints are softer than others, and I like a soft chalk paint that I can really put some elbow into, and you can see right now that I'm getting some different depth. One of the beautiful things about sanding chalk paint is it's so smooth. If you got it smooth, you know, if you're worried about brush strokes, if you sand, those brush strokes will be gone, and really is nice. I think you can still do wet sanding. That does a decent job, but sometimes you want the results to feel like it's happened over time, and sanding does that. Now, when I do chalk paint, I sand the whole piece, and you can control how much the stressing happens. You can still sand it to get rid of some of the brush strokes, but if you want no distressing, I would probably pick some other techniques. I purposely paint, if I know I'm going to sand, I purposely paint a little rough so that I get more texture and more depth. I don't want smooth brush strokes. I want that brush stroke. I want it to look like some kid in the country painted this, maybe some grandma who didn't know how to paint or something like that. But bottom line is, I want that texture. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm actually you can see I've got white. I think I may have even painted this with a chocolate color and then gray. So there's multiple layers here. I want all those layers to come out in different parts of this project. And just go over it until you know that you've sanded all of it. How much is totally up to you. You might say, well, what happens if I mess it up? Well, stop what you're doing. Maybe backtrack to some more white paint, build up a layer again, Sometimes practicing on smaller pieces like this is the way to go before you tackle the dresser. let the piece do too. This one feels very farmhouse, very rugged too. So that's one example of a project. I'll put that inside. Another one that I like to do is spindles, candlesticks, oftentimes it's kind of bedposts, projects, like this. Very popular. Circles do really well. You want to disguise your brushing. Go back to the perfect way of doing it. You just have to move that sandpaper around. Now right now I wouldn't be calling this so much sanding as much as distressing. Tearing up the page. Going to the rough. If you want to soften it, roughness. Trying to reveal here is the depth of the layers that I put on there purposely. So this worn out once they used the cars driving by. You can see here and I'll continue this. For these kinds of projects, I like to use sponge brushes better because I think they get curved areas better, and they're easier on the hands than doing this sandpaper like this. Yeah, I can do that, but I'm not surface areas a lot. If you want more, get a harder, less used sandpaper around to really go at it. I think there are people out there that like the light gently sandpaper. Yeah, sometimes I'll look at it from how much of the brush strokes to take it off, so we can really want that soft feel. The switch is actually hopefully understand it. Maybe change directions to different probably more out randomly. place where you can get bed frame cheap about one. I actually found a headboard on the side of the road this weekend and cannibalized it so I can get one of the post off of it. So right now I'm just going back and looking for anything that might just need a little bit of extra standing. I don't want too many brush strokes. How much, go back to another area if you need to. Frames are very popular. I don't always do white. A lot of people out there do like a variety of colors. Like this will be for a boy's room or someone who likes blue. I rarely just do everything in white. Yes, you want to distress the back. Standing off the wall. Sanding nice and the more paint you put on the piece, the set of mason jars. Still as popular as it used to be. Just about anything. There's a lot of colored glass. I don't do anything valuable. Just stuff and pieces of vintage tools. Not much value in them. They're just chalk painting. Now they're great staging pieces, centerpieces. This is not focusing these to be used. I've painted the inside. If you try and use this thing, it'd be kind of crazy. But this would be great on a mantle. Maybe a little buffet setting to put together. Thanksgiving. Sanding. Usually I'll blow out the inside. Sometimes these come with decoration cap. So sand that too. If you don't have it, that's fine. Drop the price. Really nice, very easy to do. You can paint this in one night. Sometimes I'll let it dry overnight because it's thick. Sand it the next day. Top coat that night. You got it on your decoration table. So that's an example of chalk painting, distressing sand glass. I'm currently working on I'll call it a dresser. It's actually an entertainment center now. The top drawers out. And this is one of the drawers for the piece that I'll be finishing up this week. But I really like the details that's in here. This has not been undercoated. It's pretty much primed and painted white. If I distress this, I'll be revealing a little bit of color, not a different color. Sometimes I'll glaze this. I've demonstrated that before. But I'm just going to go with the sanding. I want to keep it white. It'll increase the market who likes this piece. It's all about gray and teal. People live here finicky. I'm going safe. I don't always do that. I usually don't. But take a look at what happens when I'm just lightly sanding this using the aggressive sanding pad. I'm trying to pop out all these grooves. I want to just kind of break, drag this sanding pad over. These details, all the details that you've seen from a distance. I'm not too worried about brush strokes. I did a pretty good job of painting rather smoothly on this one because I knew I wouldn't be able to sand every bit of it. Let me just keep going and I'll show you one side versus the other. Now, if I was doing this for a client and they said, hey, I don't want to distress it, I wouldn't distress it. That's up to them. I don't do a lot of commission work like this. How much do you want? Maybe find a photo you like and say, I want to sand that much. It's up to you. Some people love sanding. Blow this off. Let's take it up to 4. Details just work really well. Pop up so nicely. Get really crazy in there if you want to. share. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer